Well, happy July 4th weekend one more time. I really do feel like if you are here, the Sunday after July 4th falls on a Saturday, which that only happens once every 7 years, you deserve some type of extra credit for that. I don't know what that means. Unless you are the individual in my neighborhood, and I don't even say what my neighborhood is, you'll just know who you are, that made the decision to set off fireworks at 4 a.m. this morning. Yeah, if that's you, you might be the first person in the 17-year history of North Point that I'm not glad that you're here with us today, because that's a choice. In fact, I'd love to meet you. You're probably sleeping at this point, and just know the series of decisions ultimately led to that. But I really am. I'm grateful to be here with the rest of you. And speaking of America, I can't believe we have made it this far into the process and have yet to discuss the World Cup so far from stage. I feel like that is partially my fault because I'm like the resident sportscaster of our teaching team. But it has been an amazing experience. Like, to be good in the same year that we are one of the host nations, I don't know if you realize this, but we haven't ever won back-to-back World Cup games before until this year. We've never had a positive goal differential before. Like, it has just been such an amazing experience. I have been a die-hard soccer fan now for at least 3 weeks, and I have developed some strong opinions, right? I mean, Wednesday, watching that game, when that ref held up a red card, I am like, you are ruining the beauty and integrity of the history of our sport. Like, what? You cannot do this. Like, we'll see what happens, tomorrow night, but it's just been amazing. There's been some incredible social media content as well. I don't know if you guys have seen any of this. Like, the most confiscated item getting taken at airport security going back home. Do you guys know what it has been? From our European cousins going across the border, it has been ranch, of all things. It's like America to them is bald eagles and fireworks and ranch. And this is not even an AI-generated image. This is a real, Hidden Valley's doing a whole marketing campaign across Europe because of how much there's excitement there has been around ranch. But it's been positive. It's like bringing the world together. All of the stars are playing so well. And then, of course, for it to go over July 4th as well, our 250-year anniversary. Does anybody know what the title of yesterday, not like Independence Day, I'm not being condescending. It's called the Semi-Quincentennial. That's what 250 years is called. So that's what we celebrated yesterday. Happy Semi-Quincentennial weekend to all of you. And as I think about that number, if you're here last week, Jen kind of started similar in a different context, but we were trying to debate, does that make America young or old? And she talked a little about this too. But it is so interesting because I think the actual answer to that is it depends. And it depends on your context or how you're measuring it, because if you go by national, modern, sovereign state, we are actually in the older third of countries in the world. Older, surprisingly, than countries like Germany, that formed in 1861, or Italy in 1871. But then if you go by national identity, and you think about the people of Greece or Egypt or India or China, I mean, they have thousands and thousands of years on us, and then we become quite young. But I think it's an interesting data point to think about, that it matters based on your perspective or context because of the conversation that we're having today called Don't Look Down. Because if I was to look at you and I was to say, are you young or are you old? I actually think for every single one of us, the answer would still be, it depends. You can be 4 years old, and when you have a newborn sibling, all of a sudden that 4-year-old seems so old, don't they? It's such a weird phenomenon. You could be 90 years old, standing next to the Roman Colosseum and seem quite young in context. So it depends on what we're comparing to or what our frame of reference is. I think about personally for me, I had the opportunity to speak on a Sunday morning at North Point for the first time when I was 19 years old. And it wasn't because of skill or character or responsibility. All those things would have been great. It was because of physical proximity. I was the closest person in the room to Buck, our senior pastor, when he realized he was going to need an emergency backup, so he just asked me to do it. That is really how it happened. In fact, we were on a mission trip together in Kenya, and we'd done this twice. So we spent about a month together in Africa, and the only picture we've ever taken together is the one with his eyes closed here. So that's the best I could get you. But about 15 years ago, he gets the call as we land back in the U.S. I think we're in Washington, D.C. or something, and about to fly home to Austin. And he gets the call that he needs to reroute and go see a family member that has fallen ill in Colorado. It's an emergency. And I'm sitting next to him on the plane, and he's like, hey, I was just going to share about what we did in Juja, Kenya this week anyways. I just think you should get up and talk about it. And I'm like, okay. And you would think we at least would use that 4-hour flight to prepare for the sermon or something like that. We didn't. We watched the movie 300, and that was kind of the rest of our time. Needless to say, that first Sunday, it was an absolute train wreck. Like, so embarrassing. And that's not any form of like false humility or anything like that. I mean, just really to belabor the point. If you were here a couple of months ago, we had Klein Thompson speak for the first time with Jen here on stage. She's just a phenomenal young leader and communicator. But when she was a high schooler and she was about to speak for the first time in our high school environment, she was doing an audition, and I got her permission to share this story. And mid-audition, she just gets so overwhelmed, anxious, that she starts to break down, cry, and has to stop the run-through. And she comes and sits in one of these first chairs, and she's really upset about it, and I do the only thing that makes sense to me. I show her the video of my first time speaking. She laughs hysterically, gets back up on stage and crushes the rest of the run-through. She's like, this might be bad, but it's not Jordan bad. Like, you know. In fact, we have this like really rough screenshot of it the first time, and I was unwilling to play the audio clip because it's still too painful. But for about the entirety of my 20s, we went from Parkside Elementary here to Arrow Point, our last facility, and for all of my 20s, I would get on stage on a Sunday morning whenever I would speak, and I would have this insecurity that I'm too young. I get it, the Bible's the authority and all that, but ultimately I am aware there are people in the room that have 4 times my life experience and they don't want to hear from me. And then 4 hours later, I would stand on the exact same stage in the exact same room as the student ministry director with our high school students, and I would have the voice, I'm too old. I was a college student, and already I didn't know the slang, what music they were listening to, how they were dressing. It was like trends changed so fast, and in the same day, I would have these different insecurities. I wonder for you if you have ever invalidated yourself before based on something that you couldn't control, whether that is your age, your gender, your race, your background, or story. If you've ever just pre-decided, I'm not going to try to audition for that, I'm not going to interview for that job opportunity, I'm not going to speak up in this room because I don't know enough, I don't know enough about the Bible to actually serve with the next generation, I'm not qualified. It's not all of us. It's a certain disposition, but for a part of the room, a third of the room, a half of the room, we silence ourselves before anyone else even gets the chance to. We don't use our voice or use our God-given gifts to impact others because we have pre-decided we don't have what it takes. I remember being on a leadership team retreat really young with our North Point leadership team, and I was intimidated by everybody in the room at that time, people who had led at executive levels at large corporations, people who had started North Point, and I was in my 20s. I'm like, I can make coffee for you guys. I don't know. And we had this exercise where we went around the room and everybody gave each other just candid feedback on how they could benefit the team more. Some of you would love that exercise, and for some of you that would be your worst nightmare. But everybody in the room consistently said, Jordan, you have to speak up more. We never hear from you. And if you wait until you are the oldest or the smartest and most experienced person in the room to speak up, we're just never going to hear your voice. It's interesting because our culture is both simultaneously obsessed with and dismissive of youthfulness at the same time. We're terrified of our own gray hair and wrinkles, and we spend an incredible amount of money to stay looking younger than we actually are, and we're hopeful that artificial intelligence is somehow going to provide the real-life fountain of youth. And yet, when a young person speaks up and we disagree with them, we give them the sweet smile and say, oh, you will understand someday when you're older. Now, that's a certain part of the room. That's not everybody that has that disposition. There are some of us, maybe another third. We'll break this into 3 groups. There's another group of us that your perspective is more, the ship has already sailed. Like, my best opportunity is already behind me. Whether you missed it and you're like, I'm too old, I have too many skeletons in my closet, I've made too many mistakes, I can't be used for anything significant at this point anymore, or at this age, or I've started too late in the game. Or maybe you just feel like your best days are behind you. You did have some great moments. You did have some heights. You did start and sell the business, and now you're like, all of my meaningful contributions are behind me. That might be another third of the room. Do you know the average age in the United States of America to launch a successful business? Like the average age of the entrepreneur that starts a business that makes it in the U.S., it's 45 years old. The average age of a Fortune 500 CEO, the 500 biggest companies in America, do you know the average age of that CEO? It's 58 years old. At the time when most of us, if we're being honest, we're like on the countdown to retirement, ready to sail off into the sunset, is actually the average age that people are making some of the most meaningful contributions that have had a now lifetime of experience and wisdom that they have accumulated. But for so many of us, and you can feel this way at any age, right? I mean, I've talked to seniors in high school that are jealous of freshmen feeling like they missed their high school experience and now all of their opportunities are gone. I mean, you can feel that way kind of in any stage or space. Now, there's another group of us as well, maybe this would be the last third of the room, that have experienced some life. Maybe things have gone really well. Maybe you've worked really hard. Maybe you've been really successful. And I don't know if you'd actually say it out loud, but you do look down at the generation coming after you. You've stopped listening somewhere along the way, that you feel they're not worth your time or your energy, and in those moments, hurt your own story by missing out on the creativity, the energy, the inspiration, the hopefulness, or even just the opportunity to invest back in a generation coming after you in the same way that somebody gave you an opportunity or a platform or invested in you. In this conversation today, Don't Look Down, we're really talking about almost different postures and perspectives than we really are ages. Whether you feel experienced or inexperienced, like you have what it takes or you don't, we're going to ask some questions like, what if younger people do not have to wait to be useful? What if the social media narrative of just live it up and fill your closet with a lot of regrets and skeletons and hey, you don't have to do anything meaningful or build a meaningful skill or invest in something meaningful right now because you've got all the time in the world? What if that's not actually a helpful message to our stories? And what if older, however it is that you would define older people, are not done being useful? What if some of your most significant conversations are yet to come? I can tell you this as still a relatively young communicator, that there are a couple of families, I will just say they're in the retirement category. I don't even want to call them old, because again, it's just all relative. But there are some families here that will find me in the lobby after service or will send a thought-out email on a Monday morning that are some of the most encouraging words I'm able to receive, because I'm aware they've lived life. They have grandchildren and great-grandchildren. They know what is most important in life. And when they reach out and say, Jordan, I saw this, I noticed this, I appreciated this, it just lands in a different way. If that's you and you're in the room, like your voice matters, and North Point, full of all these young families, like we need you and your life and your experience and your leadership and your wisdom. I want to look at a passage today that we have so many opportunities, really Old and New Testament both, to look at interactions between the generations, but one that might be the most personal example of something like that takes place in 1 Timothy, because it's written from a mentor, Paul, who writes about a third of our Old Testament, to a young leader, probably in his 20s, a young pastor-type leader in Timothy. And we know that Paul is the author here because in verse 1 he says, this letter is from Paul. That's our best context clue. An apostle of Christ Jesus, appointed by the command of God our Savior in Christ Jesus, who gives us hope. And then we know his audience because he says, I am writing to Timothy. Really appreciate when Paul writes like this, because it's like, okay, we don't have to do a lot of investigative work. But he calls him this really beautiful phrase. He says, my true son in the faith. Because Timothy was an apprentice to Paul for years, and he learned from him, and he lived with him, and he traveled with him, and he learned about life, how to interact with people, how to serve others, how to teach the scriptures faithfully. He gained so much of his confidence and his faith from this man, Paul, and so his words weigh heavy on him. And what's cool is we're getting kind of the wise sage perspective from Paul, if you will, because when he writes this letter, he's probably between 55 and 60 years old. He's actually the age that Jesus would have been if Jesus hadn't been crucified. They're in the same generation. This isn't like generations and generations later. But we get to see what is most important to Paul, what he's like, hey, I've got limited space and paper here to work with. This is what's most important that I don't want you to miss. And he says, right off the bat, something I think is just timeless. He says, when I left for Macedonia, I urged you to stay there in Ephesus and stop those whose teaching is contrary to the truth. Don't let them waste their time in endless discussion of myths and spiritual pedigrees. These things only lead to meaningless speculations which don't help people live a life of faith in God. Again, we're reading almost like a journal article type thing, right? Or like a journal entry here. It is this very like personal, relational, high trust letter. And he's saying, with all my life experience and wisdom, and Paul has gone around and debated with some of the smartest people in the world and shared the gospel in places where it hasn't gone before, he says, let's not waste our time debating the secondary things that don't matter. And the reason I think that is so timeless is because we have more information available to us than ever before, more voices and opinions than ever before. I mean, in an hour of scrolling, we hear more voices than our ancestors did in a lifetime. And as a result, we can get sideways about so many secondary things that are not central to what matters most. And Paul says that would be a waste of our time, a waste of our words, a waste of our life. We want to help people live a life of faith in God. It's actually one of the reasons that the way we communicate on Sundays is application heavy at the end of each, because we don't want you to just hear some big religious, smart-sounding words. We want Monday to look different because you showed up on Sunday. So he gives like a thesis statement right off the bat in verse 5. He says, the purpose of my instruction is that all believers would be filled with love that comes from a pure heart, a clear conscience, and genuine faith. Hey, everything that comes after these next 4 chapters, my purpose is that you'd be filled with the love of Jesus, and we show others how to do the same. But some have missed this whole point. They've turned away from these things and spend their time in meaningless discussions. They want to be known as teachers of the law of Moses, but they don't know what they're talking about, even though they speak so confidently. Again, he's being blunt and straightforward and honest because it's his personal letter to Timothy. But he's saying this is what can get sideways. This is how we can get distracted. And then, to jump to the end, chapter 4, there's 4 chapters in Timothy, he kind of comes back to the same concept once again, to double down, to say anything that is distracting from helping people be filled with the love of Jesus is ultimately what we want to avoid. He says, have nothing to do with godless myths and old wives' tales. Rather, train yourself to be godly. For physical training is of some value. Notice he doesn't say no value. Message for a different time. There is some importance to physical training, but godliness has value for all things, holding promise for both the present life and the life to come. This is a trustworthy saying that deserves full acceptance. That is why we labor and strive, because we have put our hope in the living God, Jesus, who is the Savior of all people, and especially of those who believe. Command and teach these things. So he gives this kind of whole setup in its cornerstone, the beginning and the end, with let's point people back to the person of Jesus, the person of Jesus, the person of Jesus. And then in verse 12, he says what is really the most well-known part of this chapter, and it's the inspiration behind the title of today's conversation and why we're having this conversation the day before Camp 75 starts tomorrow. He says, don't let anyone look down on you because you are young, but set an example for the believers in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, and in purity. Now, right off the bat, his phrasing is really interesting here. He says, don't let anyone look down on you, as if that is something that Timothy can ultimately control. That's not really in our ability to decide how it is that somebody else chooses to respond or chooses to think about us. Now, there are certainly things he can do to put himself in the best possible position, but that's not really his responsibility. What Paul is speaking to here is he's encouraging Timothy not to give in to the insecurity that might have the potential to take him out. That I don't have what it takes to do what God has called me to do. I am not experienced enough. I am not qualified. I am not old enough. I'm not a good enough leader. Fill in the blank. He's like, don't give into that temptation. The way that I would make it more universal for each of us is I think some version of the thought, God can't use me because of me. Whether it's something in your control or not, God can't use me because I'm too young, because I'm too old, because I don't have enough experience, because I'm too busy, because I don't know enough, because I don't believe enough, I doubt sometimes, because I haven't learned enough about the Bible yet to help somebody else or invest in, and whatever it is that you fill in the blank, the message, the core insecurity, God can't use me because of me, is what Paul is pushing on here with Timothy. When instead he suggests throughout his letters, but certainly in his encouragement to Timothy, is that God can use you because he's God. And that's the whole point. God can use anybody from any walk of life because it's not based on you, it's based on God's ability to use you. Another way to maybe phrase that is that it's not that you have what it takes, it's that God has what it takes. And this is so crucial because, again, we will write ourselves off for so many different reasons, but this is God getting the credit when he uses a really wide range of people from all kinds of different backgrounds and experiences. If you were just to take a sample, like Old Testament and New together, and again, you don't even have to be familiar with the Bible to hear some of these. I mean, if you think about it, Mary, the mother of Jesus, she was probably a teenager, maybe a young teenager. If you think about the disciples, All of them, but probably Peter, were in their teenage years. Peter was probably married and in his young 20s. We think about them as these old men with these long, white, gray beards, and that just historically is not the case. Jesus' whole public ministry, he was between 30 and 33 years old for the 3 years of his public ministry. Paul, like we just talked about here, he wrote most of his letters between 55 and 65 years old. You think about Moses, and all of Moses' ministry is after he's 80. Everything we know about let my people go and freeing slaves from Egypt and parting the Red Sea, all that, he's 80 and above. Abraham and Sarah have Isaac at an advanced senior citizen age. We'll just call it that. I mean, God uses people from all kinds of different ages. And then people from all kinds of different backgrounds. He uses righteous, faithful people like Daniel. He uses people that have made a mess of their lives, like a Paul, or like the tax collector that Jesus calls to be a disciple in the person of Matthew. He uses all kinds of different people in terms of resources, like Solomon, one of the wealthiest men who has ever lived, an incredible leader, an incredible thinker and businessman. He uses somebody like him, and the woman at the well, who is the first to really go and share the gospel, who's an outcast hiding from society because of her previous 5 marriages, and she's the first that Jesus reveals who he really is, too. You think about all this range of different stories, and what's the common denominator in all of those? It's God himself. That God can use people because he's God, not because of what we do or don't bring to the table. So does that mean, well, we do nothing? Because now it doesn't matter, because I guess God can use anybody. And clearly, when you read it in context, that would be the opposite of what Paul is writing to Timothy. Because he says, set an example. Meaning this is how you participate with God in what God has invited you into or what he has called you to do. He says, set an example in speech and conduct, which is more external, in the things we say and do. Do people watch your life and know that there's something different about you? Know that there's something different that inspires you, that something has changed in you, something is transforming from the inside out, and they're curious about it as a result? And then he lists this more internal category of love, faith, and purity. Trust in who God is, this selfless goodwill for another. That's what love really ultimately is, this purity or this peace in the inner conscience as you are faithful to do what God has called you to do. And he says people can see that and sense that, and you are an example to them, an inspiration in that, and ultimately point people back to Jesus because of the way that you live. In fact, he gives them this long list of instructions then. Again, some of this is personal to Timothy. He says, until I come, devote yourself to the public reading of Scripture, to preaching and to teaching. That doesn't mean that everybody is to preach publicly, but I think much more universal in verse 14, he says, do not neglect your gift, which was given you through prophecy when the body of elders laid their hands on you. Be diligent in these matters. Give yourself wholly to them. Not your life doesn't matter now or your decisions don't matter now. They actually matter more because God is real and God desires to use you. That's why your decisions matter, so that everyone may see your progress. Watch your life and doctrine closely. Persevere in them, because if you do, you will save both yourself and your hearers. Summarize that section. He tells them, in light of the fact that God can use you, don't neglect your gift and watch your life diligently. That your decisions matter, in public and in private. That integrity matters. That character matters. That's going to give you the ability to use your gift and benefit others. And to not neglect your gift means, one, to use it, to put yourselves in positions where you can benefit other people. It means to grow it or cultivate it. You might be a natural-born leader, a good leader, but you can become a great leader with care and development and coaching and mentoring, and to ultimately use it not just exclusively for your benefit, for the benefit of others as well. And when you think about what it is that God has uniquely gifted you with to benefit somebody around you, it might be helpful to note that if you don't know what it is, because it feels natural to you, you may not actually know that it's a gift. Because you might just assume, well, everybody can do this, right? Like, this is normal, this is natural, this is easy. And people on the other side of you are looking at you like, no, that is not easy for me. You have a unique gift in this category. Some of you have seen what it is before. You could name it. You know what God has gifted you with. I hope that somebody else has affirmed it in you, and it's not just self-identified, and it's not just your mom. That's basically American Idol for you, right? A lot of people embarrass themselves on American Idol because, like, I have a gift and my mom said so. So if somebody outside of those two people have said you have something, like, pay attention to that if somebody has affirmed that in you. It's not helpful to be just, like, falsely humble about it because God has gifted you with something to impact people around you. Some of you can walk into a messy situation, a difficult life circumstance, and you're, like, drawn to it. You can just sit in some of the hardest moments, the greatest grief or loss or betrayal, and you think that's just what people do. And you don't realize that most of us actively avoid those kinds of messy situations and people because you have a unique gift. Some of you can listen and you can just hear the meaning behind the words that people are actually trying to communicate. Some of you can feel what other people feel naturally. You can pick up on the temperature of the room and step into it with somebody. Some of you can make complicated ideas and you can communicate them in very simple ways. Some of you are brilliant strategic thinkers, or you're analytical, you're great problem solvers. Some of you are naturally creative. Some of you are great leaders. You just have been since T-ball, and that's always been reflected back to you. We have a friend here on staff where we can't go anywhere with her in public without somebody yelling her name and giving her a hug. She's just a connector. She's that kind of person that makes everybody feel welcome and comfortable. I heard somebody once describe their guest services role as, I just talk to people, it's no big deal. I'm like, do you know how hard it is in 2026 to just talk to strangers? That is a unique gift and a unique skill. I don't know what it may be for you, but I have great confidence that whatever it is, it's meant for the benefit of others, to make an impact on those around you. So if you're here and you're in that perspective that you would say you're in the younger category, again, whether that means age or really just you're in a new season of life or a new experience, the challenge to you would be, let's not look down in shame. That I don't have what it takes, or because of what I've done, or because of where I've been. Don't over-identify with that insecurity. And if you're here and you'd say you're in the older, whether again that means age or just more experience or skill set or success, let's not look down in condescension. Let's not look down at those around us like they have nothing to offer, or just because you've learned a lot, it doesn't mean that you have learned everything. There's an opportunity to be inspired or experience hope or maybe invest in the generation that's coming after you. And for both of us, let's look up at the one who made you. Because when you keep your eyes focused on him, when you keep your eyes focused on the person of Jesus, I like to say that followers of Jesus and the ideal should become the most confident and the most humble people in the room simultaneously. Humble because you realize that God created you, and he created everybody else, that we're on this equal playing field, that he has given you all of your gifts and your resources and the people in your life that's helped you cultivate them. That's humbling. And God created you, which gives you great confidence to say you are not an accident, you are made on purpose for a purpose. And when you look up, you can walk in both of those, and it gives you the freedom to look out at those around you and not just stay myopic on our own anxieties or stresses or fears or busy schedules, but look up at the needs and the opportunities of others. And when we start to do that, we start to live and act more like the person of Jesus. So let me just ask you, who might you be called to set an example for? Some of you, you're very consciously aware of this. You're in some type of leadership role or public-facing role, or you're a teacher or whatever it might be. For others of us, it's so easy to take this for granted. Even if it's just one person who is watching your actions and decisions, who is it that you have influence over, that you might be able to set an example for? And they'd be curious about that change that's taken place inside of you. It's why we talk about the four big things here at North Point as the four kind of next steps that are catalysts for our faith, and one of those is to invest and invite. Because when you look up out of your own way and out of your own schedule, and you look out at the people around you, and you say they are also made in the image of God and also somebody for whom Jesus has died, and you realize, man, I'm going to sacrifice some of my time and energy to invest in their world, we start to see the world more like Jesus sees the world. And when you extend that very simple invite, and you just say, hey, come with me tomorrow morning, come with me to Camp 75, come with me to Summer Jam, when you extend those kinds of invites or you shoot that kind of text, you have no idea what hangs in the balance of an invite. You just don't. As well as you might know somebody, you can't know all the complexities of their story, all the things that they're struggling with. And you have no idea the freedom they might experience down the road in a relationship with Jesus, who they might meet here besides you. You don't know what's going to change in their relationships or in their marriage or in their parenting or in future generations that come after them, what addictions might be overcome, what kind of hope they might see after a season of depression. You have no idea what hangs in the balance of an invite or the trickle-down effect after that invite as well. And we have that kind of ability when we participate in what God has called us to do, when we use our gifts for the benefit of others and we don't look down in our own little world or don't look down at people around us. We are, of course, having this conversation for a purpose on the cusp of Camp 75 beginning tomorrow. And I think even if you're an out-of-town guest, or even if you're like, I'm flying to Hawaii this evening and I'm not willing to cancel the trip, I still think there is universal application in why we do something like Camp 75 over the course of the summer. It's the way we're for our community in the summer, the way we show up and serve others and use our gifts, and it's a multi-generational movement. There's a role for every single person at every stage of life experience to make a difference. I try to explain it these parts because if you haven't been a part of it before, it can absolutely get confusing. But the first part of Camp 75 took place about a month ago at boot camp, where 400 of our middle and high school students went away for a week and had the best week of the summer, had a ton of fun, formed all kinds of new relationships. But they were also placed on teams of about 6 students and were trained and prepared and equipped to go love our community 75 minutes at a time for a week in July, and that starts tomorrow. Camp 75 begins on Monday, and there are these 75-minute time slots where students will lead a camp in the front yard or the backyard of the host home for preschool and elementary age kids and their parents. They'll also use one of those 75-minute time slots each day to serve a local nonprofit in our community as well. So there's just an incredible footprint this week, an incredible opportunity to make an impact, to serve, to love our community, and ultimately to point people to Jesus. And we celebrate the whole experience next week with what we're calling this year Summer Jam. It is during both services, the 9 and the 11 a.m. We have all kinds of different food vendors. There's craft popsicles and kettle corn and cotton candy. We've got photo booths and a DJ and giveaways and just all kinds of fun next week. It's an incredible opportunity to say, hey, just come with me. This whole faith thing, it's having an impact on me, and I think it might benefit you too. Would you come with me on Sunday? One of those kinds of moments or opportunities. But the experience is so personal for me, as it's personal for Josh that was up here explaining earlier, because I got to be in this room with our students at boot camp. But what was really fun for me in preparing for today's message in particular is if you've been a part of North One, I share a couple of these photos repeatedly because they're big parts of my story. But what I started to notice in this was the multi-generational aspect of every single one of these pictures. What's easy to miss in this chaos of 400 students is the 60 adult leaders that are all standing on the back of that stage that decided it was worth a week away from home, off my job, taking vacation time to be here and to invest and show up for the next generation, to either be the adults I'm glad I had or that I wish I would have had when I was their age. I shared this picture a couple of weeks ago, which was my first experience with North One as a student. This is just after electricity was invented, and you can see in my soft smile that I didn't want to be there. I was missing a baseball tournament. My home life was chaotic at this time. I was not a church person. I didn't go to church regularly. But what I didn't highlight in that was the adults who took this picture, who was the person who shared about the person of Jesus with me for the first time. I think about 3 weeks after this, I was at my first Camp 75 on a team as a student. And while I shared the story of being on a stage when I was 19 for the first time, this is the first time where I was sharing about Jesus for the first time, because that was my role with my team for that day, in a moment where I'm still kind of deciding for myself who I believe Jesus to be. But I look at a picture like this, and that little guy right there in the bright orange is one of our high school captains this year. You think about the trickle effects. The host home sitting there on the stairs, and the drivers and parents sitting around in the background forming new relationships. There's a multi-generational impact making this happen. 3 years after this, I was an intern, and it's the closest I've ever come in a single moment to saying, this is the day I decided that I wanted to go into ministry. It's never something I dreamed of, which I feel like almost every person who does ministry says that. They're like, so be careful when you say something like that. But I was in business school at the University of Texas. I got to do my internship for my business degree with North Point. I was interning for them. And that night, I was at Camp 75 Extreme, full of whipped cream, like smelled disgusting, chocolate sauce all over my face. And about 5 minutes before, had seen my friend who was a senior in high school at that point. I played baseball with him. And he came up to me, and he shared that earlier that year, he had tried to take his life. That night, he placed his trust in Jesus. We hugged each other, we cried, and that night, I just said, I want to be a part of whatever the chocolate sauce, whipped cream, place my trust in Jesus moment is, as often as I can for the rest of my life. And in the background of that picture, you see our drivers that are a part of making that experience and that moment possible for me. This last year, I got to host for the first time a full generation moment happening, which Davis never would have been sitting at one of these if I wasn't invited as a high schooler. He was a little too young last year to be the target audience, but you see him watching in the back, curious at everything that's happening, and you can see all of these adults, all of these drivers, all of the parents hanging around, forming connections, making these moments possible for students investing in the next generation, because it's a multi-generational movement and effort. I could keep sharing example after example, story after story. I would love for you to hear from somebody whose experience with North Point was through Camp 75 and whether they think you should be a part of it this week or not. So take a look at their story.
My name is Krista Thompson. I am married to Brian Thompson, and I have two boys, Braden and Brody Thompson. Braden is 14 and Brody is 11. I grew up going to church on Easter and Christmas Eve is all I can really remember. In college, I got involved in a smaller church. I fell in love with the church and the people in the community. And then when I met my husband, I knew I wanted to kind of continue that journey. Here in Austin, it was hard at first to find something that kind of fit with what we were comfortable with and it not being too big. Once we had our oldest son, that's when we were like, okay, it's time. We want to get involved in something that he could grow up in and that we could kind of get to know people a little bit more. So we kind of settled here, and it's been a great journey so far.
Building that relationship with my small group and being with them and learning about God through that, and then later on serving with the first graders and little kids, I think that helped a lot.
I wouldn't think that I would be coming to North Point every Sunday, have fun things to do on stage, and be with awesome people.
A friend of mine that I had known, the Libby family, I'd known her since 5th grade. I had seen she posted something on Facebook about a camp that she was doing at her house, and I was like, you know what? We're not doing anything, and so I was like, yeah, why don't you guys go? And when I picked them up, they were both talking a mile a minute. They had all these colored tally marks down their arms and pockets full of candy. They were like, do we get to go back tomorrow? And so they invited a friend with them on another, one of the last days there, and that's kind of where it started, right? And we were like, this was really fun.
A lot more kids should come to Camp 75. It's like the best 4 days ever. I just have a lot of fun in it.
My oldest got baptized through the Baptism Bash when he was in 5th grade, and then my youngest just got baptized through Baptism Bash this past one in May, and it was really cool because my oldest got to baptize my younger son.
I just felt like it was the right time to get baptized. I've been thinking about it for a while, but I didn't ever do it, so it just felt good to get baptized.
If you, are thinking, I would love to invite people, I want to host, I want to do this, but I don't know how to go about that, I would just encourage you to do it, right? Because there's so many people like myself who are just silently watching, right? And kind of just on that, I don't really know, or even just looking for a place to connect, not only getting to know your community and getting to make friends with people that live close by you, but just knowing that you could completely change the trajectory of a family's life by just putting out a simple invite or putting something on social media. I do wonder, would we have gotten involved? Would we be where we are right now? Would both of my boys have been baptized? I wonder a lot of those things, right? Had it not been for that post or that invitation. So I would highly encourage, if you're gonna host, to put it out there. Or if you don't even know if you wanna host, try it, do it. It's so fun. My youngest has now gone through Extreme. My oldest has now served for 3 years in Camp 75. So now getting to see the other side of that, of what he's getting to do and pour into kids that, were him back in the day, it's really cool to be able to see.
For whatever reason, there's just a disproportionate amount of stories around here of the what if, would I have been a part, would I have ever gotten involved if not for that invite, if not for something like Camp 75. And every single one of you have the potential to extend an invite that way or to use your gifts or voice to impact somebody's story that way. So, I'll be unapologetic about it. If you are a part of North Point, if you call this place home, I would encourage you to do whatever it takes to be a part of this week. If it looks like rearranging schedules or calendars or canceling some things, there are still opportunities to drive, which is an incredible experience, getting to know a team and see the energy of this room, especially in the mornings throughout the week. Opportunities to host at all time slots, especially the evenings. That 5 o'clock slot, or the 5:15 slot is a really important one as well. But however it is that you would be a part, there's an opportunity on camp75.org to be a part. You can also find a camp if you're looking for a place to show up in my neighborhood. Do I have one? Can I bring my kids to one? And this screenshot is one of my favorite to see, just the geographic footprint that Camp 75 will have this week, and see all of the different host homes taking place all over our community. You can find the closest home to you on there as well. but for every single one of us. Again, whether you're an out-of-town guest here today or if you call North Point home, I think the idea of not looking down is universal. So this week, let's do that. Let's not look down like God can't use us, because he can, because he's God. Let's not look down at others like they have nothing to offer us, because God uses every generation not to compete, but to complete, ultimately, his church. Let's look up at the one who created us, who gives our life identity and meaning and purpose. Let's look out at those around us who are also going through this crazy thing we call life, who are carrying their own burdens and their own stories, and we have an opportunity to step into their world and make a life-changing difference in their story. Let's do that together, and if you would you pray for me right now for this incredible week that is before us? Father, thank you for this moment. God, thank you for being here with us. Thank you for loving us. God, for some of us in this moment, we just accepted an invite to church today, and we're in the beginning of a journey trying to figure out who you are. God, others of you, we've been around or we've been comfortable, but this is that moment to say yes to something you're inviting us into, to realize you have something so much more for us, a much bigger adventure than sitting in a seat just on a Sunday. God, you want to use us. You've given us gifts and resources to love people and point people to Jesus. God, for Camp 75, would you use every kid, student, adult, every driver, every host home, everybody serving our community in some way, and would the thousands who will be impacted this week ultimately be pointed to you and have more confidence that there is a God who is for them and not against them. We cannot wait to see all the stories that result and celebrate next week. God, we love you, and it's in Jesus' name that we pray. Amen. Thank you guys for joining us. Happy 4th again. We'll see you this week.